There we go. Be so noted that we are recording. So welcome to the Housing Commission meeting of April 9th. Welcome to variable weather, and if you're watching your 401k, let's say a variable market too we're in right now. So hang on. I can't watch it anymore, just have to be hopeful. So welcome and exciting to be here after a wonderful public forum that I think will be teaching us many good lessons. Those are yet to be summarized for us, and we'll talk about the schedule for that and steps going forward. First, on a matter of governance, we do have a quorum here today. Nancy, Neil, myself, and Ann and Amy as an alternate, if you would serve, please. Sure. I don't expect we'll have any votes per se, but if we do, we have the ability to do that. So thank you. I think we'll open up with a discussion about the housing forum. This is a chance for kind of informal feedback. As I mentioned, we will be receiving a report back from Resilience Planning and Design and Mark Fougere with the sort of summarizing the reporting out elements and also any written elements that were received. So the primary purpose of this section was just to kind of talk amongst ourselves, of course, publicly, with any soft feedback. You know, how do you feel it went? Even lessons to how to do it better. I did talk with Marilyn Kidder, who said she would be unable to meet the meeting, but forwarded some of her comments to me. I can relate those to you in a bit. But I think just as a general comment, and then I'll open it up for discussion. I've heard a lot of good things, a few things that we could do things better, but generally a favorable response from the public that have touched me a little bit and given me their thoughts. So open for conversation. How did it feel to you?
So. Would you just mind reading what Marilyn had to say so that we can jump from there?
Sure, be glad to. She said, "I'm sorry I can't make Wednesday's meeting, but as we had chatted earlier by email, she said, I hear my comments, hear my preliminary comments." She said, at my group, we really would have liked to have had a shorthand version of the zoning districts in town and their particulars. Maybe that would have been the table which talks about how many acres are required and densities and setbacks. So there's that table in the back of the zoning book, if you will, that is referenced so frequently, including by me. And so she said, addition along with a simple zoning district map. So that would have been helpful. Our next comment. We also found the maps did not make it particularly easy to understand what the various colors meant. They were more distracting than helpful. Even I, who know the town maps pretty well, couldn't find my own property right off. And we can talk about that a little bit, but I know that it was somewhat intentional that these maps be general enough that it's introductory of the concept and try to keep from analyzing each and every individual property and how much it might be affected. That's, for example, the expansion of the R1 zone as a concept was done with general directions of arrows, not so much to show which specific properties would be included. So that's a good and a bad. Overall, however, the format worked well. We talked about note takers not, quote, steering the conversation. And I think it was important to keep the process somewhat on track. It was nonetheless a win overall. I do so wish that we could get more younger people involved in determining the future here.
All right, so I'll jump in initially to say that I think we had a good turnout, even though we didn't have a lot of young people. We had a pretty broad spectrum of people who knew the town fairly well, so that was helpful. I agree with Marilyn, and I have a little bit more to add to the shorthand districts. I think when they showed the type of housing, since we were trying to focus on a vision, which is visual, if with, let's say with, let's see, we have a duplex, let's just put duplex out there. With one of the duplex pictures, if we could put on that it's allowed in R1, R2, blah, blah. And that it's a minimum of X number of acres, and I'm not sure the setbacks is important to the general people. But it then also to relate it to an overall map of, and the R2 district is orange and the R1 district is green, or something like that. So that visually, if we have the big map of the whole town and the districts, that they could relate to the type of housing that could go where.
Currently, existing use,
Correct.
okay.
Correct. And the other thing that you said, Rick, I read this down. Oh, and then a different, maybe the same big map, but also another visual that everybody could see at the same time together. The expansion, and that they could flash on R1 where it might be expanded to. And then skip to R2 and where that might be expanded to, but have those be two different slides with two different shades of the same color, let's say orange to light orange or vice versa. Because I was lost on that when I looked at the map.
Well, I don't disagree with you, I just want to get clarification. So there is a map, there's one map on each table, they were big 11 by 17, which showed that R1 expansion capability with some of the arrows.
The arrows were confusing.
The hours were, okay. So would your comment relate to the fact that maybe going through some slides in advance, showing the maps for everybody? And before it got into the table discussions, so everybody had that background, or you think the maps themselves just need to be better done?
I think that. I haven't thought about this, but we need the visual of the type of housing that we have listed.
Yeah.
As a whole separate slide that stays up the entire time. And we have panels of those so that people understand and can go back and forth. Instead of having all of this printed out on paper, but actually projected on something.
And probably add to that, what type of housing can go there? What you said earlier,
Right, the R1
Yeah.
can allow,
blah, 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 blah.
you know, the duplex, whatever.
Mhm.
Because when you get as far out as the agricultural, it becomes very fuzzy to people. To them, it means where cows lived, and a lot of people never even saw New London with a cow. True. I saw lots of cows. I saw lots of cows go away. Let's see, and another very strong feeling at the table was, they didn't like the feeling that we were being almost threatened, although we know what's going on at the state level, but that's something the general public probably isn't keeping track of, is how close the legislation is working to mandate some zoning changes for the entire state. And I don't know where that stands either, except to keep reading that they're still talking about it and there's stuff going forward.
So the group, the reflections, the group didn't like that threat.
Right.
Did they mind my mentioning it? I thought it was important to say that.
More than you mentioned it, there was a second person that mentioned it, it might have been Mark, I don't
Okay,
remember
okay,
who the second person was.
Okay.
And. I forgot the other part, it will come back to me, somebody else talking.
Sure.
I know what it was.
Light bulbs on. Thank you.
Is there a way that Steve or Mark could project if we added a one-bedroom condo, let's say, what that cost is to the town as far as coverage from the police, the fire, the ambulance, the grocery store? I don't even know, but what does a one house that could fit comfortably two bodies cost the town to add to the rolls? And just make it a generic one bedroom, two people. I don't know if that's something they can do from state statistics or whatever.
Well, Mark had taken a swing at that with the number of students or number of children, therefore school enrollees that would occur with different types of housing. But I think we could project that further into the actual costs. Although I had a conversation with Mark about this, and he reminded me that let's say you put up 20 condos. And I've forgotten what the statistic is, but let's say it's quite a small number. Let's say that adds 5 kids or 6 kids to the school district. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're adding a whole new classroom or a whole new teacher or a whole new, that there's an absorption factor that's allowable within the existing school configuration. So you can't really take the total school budget divided by the existing students and say, well, that's the cost per student when you add housing. So it's a little difficult to get your arms around that, he said, but we should try and certainly look at the same thing with police. At the same time, we should look at the addition to the tax rolls. Because for each, remember, the denominator of our tax rate is the assessed value of property in town, and when you build, every town should have some sort of building, because that otherwise, without any change in the denominator, the tax rate has to go up even faster.
And it's very interesting that people don't understand this because town of New London sends out the tax bill. We don't get all that money. It gets sent to other places. We collect it for this, for the county, for the school, for
Water precinct.
water, yeah. A bunch of different things, yeah.
And as far as the 1-bedroom goes, you're specific to a 1-bedroom unit that you're looking for that exercise?
Just trying to narrow down to the cost factor for a 1-bedroom condo or ADU, or, like Twin Pine was talking 40 of those 1-bedrooms. Does that mean that requires another police officer and another fireman to be added? And what's
Okay.
that cost?
Okay.
Because I understand all these things have a wide range of costs. There's a lot of stuff to factor into it, but that was the general consensus is what's this going to cost?
It'd be interesting to see what Mark's, because the limitation on what the work he's done so far was that we didn't have enough of a particular style of units to develop a database that created trends. So the 1-bedroom part may be challenging for him to come up with a data set because we just don't have many 1-bedrooms. I think there's one. Is there one unit in Hilltop that's 1-bedroom? I think there is. Do
No,
you know?
there's more, there's 2 or 3.
2 or 3. Okay. There's, a couple here and there, but I don't know if we have but it'll be an interesting.
I think they were also going down the street of ADUs.
Okay.
Is the question more just like for every 1-bedroom, regardless of what?
That's what I was trying to
structure
ask. Thank you.
It's in, is that the question where like for every bedroom that you add to the town, you're adding another person, therefore what does that mean? Can you take that number and extrapolate it? And I'm not sure you can, but does it feel like that's the question?
Yes, that is the question. That's interesting that you say that because a lot of yesterday's hearing was about number of gallons used, and they base it on for septic systems and the sewer system and the water system, 150 gallons per bedroom.
150 gallons per bedroom.
For what period of time?
50 gallons per person? No,
It's 150 gallons per bedroom.
For
And
what?
so when
Per
you go
day,
septic
per day,
system,
Ann?
That's per day?
Yeah.
And they had estimated, they felt that, I'm going off track now, but the Twin Pine had decreased that number, which is actually more realistic to decrease it. But that's what the state has had for years, is 150 gallons per bedroom for septic design, for tying in colleges, dorm rooms, that's for approvals.
Hour-long showers.
Yeah.
Okay, Nancy, sorry.
well, I don't want to contradict Ann, but that's not what I heard. And I wrote down 38 gallons per bedroom. And that the estimate for 40 units with 80 bedrooms of Twin Pines would be between 3,000 and 6,000 gallons per day.
That's what they estimated,
I
the DES.
I think that's what Twin Pines is saying by putting in their efficient,
They're efficient.
right, and then the
Ours
state is defaulting to the old 150 gallons per day. And so the argument is that there's a substantial difference. And so,
38 to 150, I would say.
right, so does the water precinct actually have enough water to produce service for the 38 gallons per day, which is what Twin Pines is making the
We'll come
argument.
back to that when we.
Yeah, let's come back to it, because the same reaction.
Yeah.
And an experience may be helpful as well.
So-
Nancy, you had some comments on this topic?
Sure, so, start with the venue, I thought the venue was good overall. I do think that, something I said. I thought that the venue was good overall. I do have to say that I found it hard when we were all Vincent, that to hear sometimes, you know, at the table, at the end of the table, the long tables. And I thought my hearing's basically okay. So anyway, so that's just a comment.
Can I just interject? I thought it helped when they put the 2 mics.
Yes, it did, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, but I guess I'm just talking about as a note taker at the table, it was hard to hear. People talking, it was a little crowded where I was. But
I was hoping originally my vision was to have round tables up in Wheeler Hall. But we had to go with rectilinear tables.
Understood. The maps, I think, well, a couple things. One, I think those amongst us and others, who understand the designations, it's not something that the common person knows and understands. So if there could be some kind of primer, I think, relative to what all those different entities really mean. And then the other thing is that I personally am not a fan of Google Maps, whether it's on the computer, but certainly they don't, I think, reproduce very well. And I think it's also human nature that people are going to gravitate to, where is my house? You know, what am I? Because I think a lot of people don't know. It just doesn't roll off the, you know, the tip of their tongue. So I think some way to find a balance to not educate, but just give them you know, give people a primer relative to that.
Can I just stop you for a second? The ability to identify where they are, is that so they can understand the reference of the overall map? Or is that so they can immediately determine what the impact is going to be on them individually?
I think it's both. I think it's to give them perspective in terms of the overall map, but okay, so where am I in this universe that we're talking about?
Thank you.
That's it for now.
Again, the visual, we didn't hit the visual correctly for them because we showed things beforehand and then they had discussion and they couldn't go back to different visions of the different buildings, especially trying to put them in a zone.
Got it. Good points. I'll jump in. I have to admit that I felt my responsibility was logistics, was improving the flow of the event and the openness so that people felt comfortable expressing themselves. We had the speaker problem. I have to say, when I walked in, there was no PA system in the morning. So it kind of arrived, or it was an afterthought, actually, that just, you know, it was there, but it hadn't been connected. And I was informed that none of the speakers were connected to each other. So we had individual microphones in a very long room and they weren't connected. So I feel like I didn't do my homework well enough on that one. So but that's how we had the rest of that. My point is that it was really hard for me to take notes and listen and get a broad understanding of what the report outs were, because I was jumping in, answering questions and dealing with small brush fires. So I don't really have much to add. I have heard from a few people that that some of the things that could have been done better, and you've echoed some of them here, It was a lot to chew, as I say, to understand, chew and comment in a short period of time. The profile sheets were terrific, but if we could have had more exposure of those with a table, either in advance with a broad presentation, so that when it came time for them to have a discussion about it, they already had some background on it, as opposed to, here's the profile, learn it, understand it,
Right,
and then give your opinion.
Right.
So I mean, we could have been there for 3 hours. So we covered a lot in the period of time we did. And I don't think it should have been any longer. But I thought we could have done a better job kind of priming people.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, I think the event was a huge success. I'm very pleased. And we're gonna get some terrific information, so.
Yeah, I thought that the turnout was great, and I'm still hearing from people who said, gee, I must have missed where that was advertised. But, you know, I was a little surprised by that.
I mean, the shopper was plain as day.
Yeah, municipal matters,
Municipal matters.
what's happening, that email that's going out that Ashley put
Yep.
together.
And
So,
3 different direct emails to 1,200 people on the they'll serve, so.
I got one. As did several of my, friends and acquaintances who were, I guess qualified as younger people. And they didn't come and they know me. And so I was surprised that none of the people I reached out to felt like they could come. I guess that's maybe a testament to how difficult it can be to attend stuff like this in my time of life. And, I think I have heard a little bit from some of the folks I've spoken to that it just feels like in terms of how and what to prioritize in their lives, this like sort of talking about these concepts that feel like they are very far away and completely removed from them. It's just maybe not something that they feel like they want to spend a lot of time voicing. I think they are much more focused on, I need a new house. Like my house is too small for us with our 2 kids, and I just need a new house. And I'd like to live in town, and there's nothing for me to buy. Like that's the point where they are right now. And they sort of feel like, I think nothing that they come to a forum to contribute is necessarily going to change that in the next 8 weeks. I think that's a kind of just a general sense. I mean, I can only speak to my table, which was a lovely group of people, and I think it was a bunch of people who were sort of preaching to the converted, all of whom I don't get the sense sort of sit around thinking about this topic a lot. Well, Steve Allen was at my table, so he spends all day, every day thinking about this topic, but otherwise it's a group of people who don't necessarily sit around thinking about this a lot, but I think everybody, when confronted with certainly the, sort of different housing styles that could be considered, we're basically like, why do we even need to talk about this? Like, yes to all. This should be, just par for the course, that these types of things should be allowed wherever it's practical and reasonable to allow them. So that part of our conversation was actually fairly succinct. I think the first half, like when Steve like called me up, I was like, it cannot possibly have been 20 minutes. Like that part felt extremely fast, and we barely scratched the surface on, because I think we were still, I say we at the table, we're still grappling with the idea of what are these zones, what changes are we talking about. When we're thinking about visioning, it's hard to even know how to have a vision when we're still just wrapping our heads around what these are. So I almost wonder if it wouldn't have been better even without maps. Just saying we've got these 4 zones. You probably don't think about them, but here's what they are. Here's what's allowed in each. And, is there at a broader conceptual level, so you don't get too far into the weeds and worry too much about where your house is and where your neighbors' houses are or whatever. Like we just think about just the concept of these zones in town and what, if anything, might you want to see change. I don't know. That may not be a great idea, but it was just an idea that I'm having right now.
So maybe also a bit towards the same theme, but there's so much to absorb and understand before they could comment, that maybe if we had less clarity, less detail, it'd be easier to absorb, and talk at a higher level.
I think that's right. I think it,
Yeah.
you know, when you show a map, it's sort of, you're thinking about things on like a street to street or a block to block level, and that maybe works against the concept of visioning, because you're already, you've gone down to street level instead of being at the, you know, drone level. Again, just a thought.
Interesting, yeah, yeah.
I think that dealing with the generation the generation range we have in town is hard for the older people, including myself, to grasp as much as when I listen to my kids or my grandkids, and they're way ahead of where I'm at. I mean, I'm glad they talk about it, so at least I know what they're thinking. But it's way beyond where I even could project we might be in 15 or 20 years. It's baffling to me, but what's their thoughts?
Yes, if you would, we are being recorded and there are others listening. Would you mind just talking in front of the microphone, please? Thank you. Just so we can
And there-
capture your comments and
there's
also
a-
let us know who you are.
Toggle switch on the top that you just have to flip it.
Yeah, we're not formal people, but we want to capture your thinking.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Thea Loughy and I'm a citizen in town and have been here for 20+ years, long enough to lose single digits. But anyway, and I went to both sessions of that you have had at the town itself so far. And my feedback specifically on the second session, which was, I thought, excellent. And I don't want to be redundant to others' comments, but I think it might have been helpful in terms of staying at the drone level and the large visioning concept. If there had been a presentation of that on one screen that everybody could look at with a visual or no visual, but if you had one big screen there where you could say, this is A and this is B, and this is what we want you to focus on here. The handouts, which I have, are marvelous, but they're so detailed, you couldn't possibly. I didn't even realize for a minute that the first batch of handouts was separate from the second, because there was just so much information to be had. And I said, I felt like it was trying to swallow a whole pig in one bite. And your first session where they did it, you guys did a marvelous presentation up front. And then we could talk, and we did talk in small groups. That felt to me, it also felt like you were asking us an awful lot in that one meeting, that maybe it needed, although I know it's hard to get people to come very often, and the meeting length was just right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very helpful. We take all suggestions and criticism as being helpful. Constructive criticism is the way you get better. So thank you.
Oh, well, it was good meeting.
Yeah, no,
I
I got it.
mean, no, I'm not, you know.
That's what I heard. Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Any other thoughts? Is there any comments? Yes, please. Please do.
Evening's good.
And you are
Mag Francis.
Meg Francis. Yes, thank you.
I wanted, well, I just sent in a little note. Okay, I thought it was a very, very, very good meeting. And a couple of things that I thought stood out is that for the first time in a short period of time, I didn't think anybody was pushing an agenda. Okay, I thought it was just open, honest conversation. There's no fighting, there was no divisiveness, okay, and I thought that was excellent. And the other thing I walked away learning is that the diversity of opinion across the spectrum of the people in that room, it was very interesting, okay, and important for us to know, all of us to know, because I sometimes think that we believe that there's a consensus,
Right,
and there's really not.
right.
That's-
Yeah, very, very good points. Very, very good points. And thank you for your kind comments about making it open and transparent. Because that's the way I think the commissioners feel. Certainly I feel that we work for the voters and we're we're only advisory. And our job is to provide information, to be as up to speed as we can on housing and make sound recommendations, and then listen, try to adjust in what we think is the right thing to do and what the community will vote on. Final analysis, the community doesn't vote on it, then our time is wasted. So it is totally transparent. Thank you. That's the way we hoped it would be. And we'll be that way going forward. Nothing further on that then. Let's move to the HOP grant update. First, well, let me jump to the financing report just quickly. Resilience Planning and Design and Mark Fougere have been working hard. We've been pushing them hard, and I think they're doing a fabulous job. And it shows in the product we're getting and the progress we're making. We have to be careful about overspending the HOP grant allotment. And currently we have about $15,000 left in the HOP grant, which means two things. One, it means we're far along in the actual work we're doing from a consulting standpoint. But it also means that we have to be particularly careful and make sure we're using them and our own time in the right balance to meet that budget. And of course, not expand. The good news is we have about $10,000 left in our municipal budget allocation for FY 25, that of course expires in June of this year, end of June. So I had a conversation with New Hampshire Housing Finance, and I spoke with Kim to make sure it was okay. And what we're going to do for work of the month of March, for which I just received invoices and need to make our monthly report, we're going to use our municipal budget. And so that will preserve this month's HOP grant allocation and put it out a little bit to build that balance. So we should have about $22,000 left with Resilience Planning and Design and Fougere going forward under our HOP grant program. Now, this is not a shell game, which is to say, gee, the fiscal year is approaching. What else can we do to spend this money? Because it's specifically only for the purpose that we intended in the beginning, which is the HOP grant program. So we're not making this up. We're just simply using the resources we have. And I will also quickly remind us all that we decreased our municipal budget allocation in FY 26. In 25, it was 15,000 plus secretarial expenses to make it 16,000 of change. In FY 26, it's 5,000 plus secretarial expenses because we're just coming off this big HOP grant expense and we needed to cut back and help the town keep the taxes as low as possible. So just as a reminder, we won't have the kind of resources in FY 26. Did you have something to add?
We can catch up after.
Okay. So I'm going to jump to strategic
Yep,
planning.
yep.
Okay. Any questions on that? Strategic planning. I had a conversation on the phone with Steve Whitman just to understand how he envisioned us to be working going forward in the rest of the HOP grant work. Understanding, if you would go to the end point, that if we were to come up with some ideas that we thought would be supported by the community for zoning amendments or revisions to regulations, if we were to be at that point, it would be in October of next year. And remembering how quickly summer passes and September arrives, that we would need to be hitting the ground running in September in order to make that timeline in a thoughtful way. So also working backwards, August tends to be a very quiet month. It's a month that I like to think will be at the beach or swinging golf clubs or pruning flowers or whatever we like to do. And so we have June and July. And at that point in June and July, I think we should, and Steve agrees, we should be working on some information sessions. So now let me jump back to the beginning. That's sort of from the end forward. Where we are today is coming off of the second forum. We will have some feedback from Resilience Planning and Design, the accumulation of all the feedback that we've received so far. That probably should be sometime in another week to 2 weeks from them in written form. Adam and I will preview it to sort of get it into a format that we think can be easily discussed. Not to filter any of it, but just to make sure it's formatted in the best manner. We don't like to filter data, that's not fair. And that in early May, we should be having a meeting of this commission. That would be our next meeting. After you've reviewed the materials that will be sent out, we'll have a chance to discuss those materials. And then from, let's say, the end of May, those materials will be fully discussed and formulated. In June and July, we could be having some sort of information sessions. Well, that's tough to do because of people's summer schedules. So it's not ideal, but it will set us up for hitting the ground running in September with information sessions that will already be practiced and working smoothly. So I say information sessions because we could do another public forum, and maybe that's what we'll decide to do. Or we may decide we would do smaller sessions, information sessions in a smaller room like this or Whipple Hall, or maybe even smaller than that, maybe coffees. Or I had one individual come up and say, I'd really love to spend time discussing these concepts and things that you're thinking about. Why don't you do something at like the refinery? Have people go in the dining room. When you walk in to the right, there's a whole separate dining room. If you had 30 people and people could order the food they want and have a brief presentation and just an open forum. So we could either do big forum, little forum, small coffee shops, something like that. You look like you're gonna say something, please.
You want these information sessions to be. Do you want these information sessions to be for giving people enough data to make informed decisions ahead of a vote? I mean, that's the end goal, right? If we are in a position where we would be having zoning amendments, which wouldn't come around until 2026, then using your timeline and working backwards. So you're saying information sessions, but really there's a goal, right? For these information sessions.
Well,
Maybe I don't understand.
it is a little bit vague because the presentation, the nature of the presentation will be a function of where we are in our thinking. And our thinking is a function of where we believe the electorate is. If we believe that the community is not along with us with some of the ideas we have, then they need to be much more informational. Or if we find that it's been informational, but they don't like it, then it's a different kind of program. But it's all based on the community engagement that we get back again.
Okay.
And so it could be either or both.
So when you talk about the endpoint, and working backwards, to me, the endpoint is, are we going to recommend to the planning board any zoning amendments? That's number one. And could we use the information meetings to get that out? Because I feel like with these two meetings, for paths forward, we have told people there is a housing problem. And that message has gotten out. Whether it's us talking to other people or us people hearing that it's a national problem or whatever, the understanding now there is a housing problem. But I feel like planning board should be at a couple of these, so, invite planning board, whoever comes, should be in some of our informational ones. I also feel we need to see how the state moves on what direction they're going and going to potentially mandate as we move forward towards these 2026 town meeting. And also the way the town moves forward. We've got a lot of stuff cooking at the town. So those all have to play into our end. I think they have to play into our end. So
I think Anne's right that the legislative session could play a very important role this season. There are some pretty dramatic proposals that could mean a lot of work for the planning board and this commission, and could really dictate the direction that we have to dedicate our energy to, depending on what goes forward.
So to that point, I would presume that the legislative liaison of the New Hampshire Municipal Association has probably identified all those pieces of legislation and done a summary. That might be something we want to capture and, somehow get out to people, just with what the current status is. We're still a long way off. We've gone through crossover, so things are either, shifted from Senate to House or whatever. And then June is always committee of conference. So we'll have to see what happens with those, and I don't know what the political will is right now in Concord for those things. But if they don't pass this year, next year will be a policy year because the budget will be done, and you can be sure they'll come back. So it might be good to have a primer on that, it seems to me my word for today. But something on that as well, and I know, New Hampshire Municipal Association does that kind of stuff.
What is crossover?
So we have 424 seats in the state legislature between the House of Representatives and the Senate. And so most bills start in the House, some bills start in the Senate because they have a later date on which they can start them. But in March, a bill that the House has been working on, and if it has passed committee or whatever, then crosses over to the Senate to be reviewed and voted on there. Vice versa, the Senate sends it over to the House. That's crossover.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
It's a good question.
There's my primer.
And what happens if there's no match? Like they're discussing the same things? What's the committee that tries to put it together? Is there a negotiation for trying to come up with something in common? Or
There usually is, and certainly it can come up in the committee of conference.
committee of conferences called? Okay.
Well, the committee of conference is where there are two things that where both houses don't necessarily agree. And so that's where it gets hashed out.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. Stuff I should know.
It's helpful to have a former state employee that probably had to argue in front of those committees on a regular basis.
That's an important and interesting arena. So state legislature action is important, and we should get word out about that. I made a note. We can work
Yep.
on that.
And the municipal association has been sending stuff out. Obviously, they represent the interests of their member municipalities. And so they are very much in favor of local control. So it can sometimes seem like they are anti-housing, but just keep in mind that when you read these summaries, that they are representing the fact that their members want to still be able to have the control of the housing styles and types by their zoning ordinance. They're not necessarily fighting against accessory dwelling units or whatever it is in general. Just remember the context of the piece.
Yeah, that's a good point. For example, you remember in March of 24, we were proposing detached ADUs. Well, I couldn't give you the reference because I can't keep track of all the bills in the House and the Senate. But I have heard there's a bill that would mandate that towns allow as of right either an attached ADU or a detached. So you just file for a building permit and you could build a detached ADU, provided you didn't already have an attached ADU. That would just be as of right, as opposed to now we allow under conditional use permit only an attached ADU up to 1,000 feet. So that's the general layout of what is ahead for us. And we'll be having more of a conversation, I will with Steve and Adam, to sort of put that out in some sort of a memo or something, just so you could have it. But this was hot off the presses, and resilience, and our consulting team is working so hard on aggregating information that we really didn't have a lot of time to bake it in a presentation form. But I wanted to be able to report to you that we have some exciting work to do. And I will stress that we are listening to the community in a very transparent way. We can't find ourselves in March of 26 putting forth ideas that we know just won't fly. It's not good for the town. It's not good for all the effort that we've been through and care that we put into it. So I mean, it's always a little bit of a guessing game, but our deep engagement with the community will help us have a better sense of success. Any other thoughts? New business. Any new business that we haven't discussed? We've openly engaged with the public, but do you have any other thoughts? This is a time for public engagement on this or some other topic you've been thinking about. We'd love to hear from you.
My name is Suzanne Hammond, and I'm here as a resident from Hilltop. And I want you all to put in the back of your head when we had a fire, as you know, probably some of you, 2 years ago. It was caused by arson. It was not electrical. There was no problem with the inside, whatever the case may be. It was caused by an individual. But it has caused us to look at our insurance. Our insurance rates went right off the wall. And they continue to go up. A lot of it has to do with we're an homeowners association. And they look at four units together versus a single unit versus double-decker units. So when you're doing your big plan or whatever, just remember down the road, it's more costly to have, now I know we've been doing 40 years ago or 50, depends on who you're talking to. And there are new regulations, you have firewalls and this and whatever, but at the end of the line, 4 or 3 versus 1, go for the single. It just put it down your list, because insurance costs are not going down. So when you're talking to the big planner, make it well known, and insurance companies just don't want to insure homeowners associations. There are very few of them.
So the policy that you're talking about is for the entire development?
Yes.
And that comes out of your annual fees and
Yes.
whatever?
So that's the master policy there.
Right.
Okay, you're not talking about your own homeowners. Okay.
But we had to change all our documents. We got 75% approval of the individual homeowners. And they had to go to their insurance and say, here is the new language. We're all gonna be the same, no matter what. And now we're going for the big umbrella so that everybody's insurance policy reads the same
On every unit.
on every unit. And it's an interesting exercise. I didn't go to a meeting and I was made head of the insurance committee.
That'll teach you.
So I will never be, now I know more about insurance than I ever wanted to know in a million years. But it's very important when you're building these clusters. It's gonna take you 3 years, 4 years. You gotta think 3 years, 4 years out, and it's very weather related. You know, they look at Hilltop and go, oh, it's very windy here. Well, you know, I'm like, well, where else could we go? And it's hard to find a less windy spot than Hilltop.
Certainly don't want to go down the insurance, squirrel hole, as Adams, uses that phrase sometimes, but, new building codes to some extent are taking care of that problem where one unit starts on fire, right, it just goes down.
Right. Right.
It has to do with what's in between those two
But the
units.
fire flew.
Correct, but that's not, I don't want to go down, that would be goofy, but what I did want to say is when you get to the point where you're doing education and information sharing, I just spent a lot of time this morning with Jay Lyon, and he has a chart which shows, I believe it's a 30-year picture that shows what's happening to the volunteer fire department in terms of where they live. So if you go back 30 years, and you look at the chart, almost everybody lived in London. And then you go 10 years later and the line goes down and then you go current, if you will. I was told that Emily has the same, at least current information for her police department. Why we care on the fire department side is obviously that impacts response time. Right, so people don't live, that's the benefit of having folks live in town. Police thing's a little bit different, but if it were me, I would talk about how that positively contributes to community policing. Right, so having folks, okay, that can live in your town who are also your police officers, for me, not necessarily for everybody, I would consider that a value add. So when you get to that point, just so that you know, Jay does have information.
This one, thank you. Yeah. Education.
Can I just add on
Yes, please.
that, I think also including teachers in that and in hospital staff. And if you were to have another meeting in terms of general information, I think some big picture things like that would help to get people. I mean, there were some people at my table who was like, well, we moved here because we like it this way, including some people whose great-great-grandparents had lived here. And I was like, well, but you're closing it. There was a diversity of opinion, but I think to help get some of the sentiment of people who've been very long time residents who may not realize, and also quite frankly, a little more information about what is going on in the State House could be helpful.
Mhm.
And I would like to endorse that. I think this initiative and these sessions have been very helpful and very transparent. And no one at my table felt that anything had been pushed on them. I think it was more a question of lack of information, and what do we do? Is that a political statement? No, it's not a political. And last, I would volunteer to help in any way I can if you need people at tables to, whatever.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you for your comments and your support. Do you have email address?
I don't know if we do. We
Could you give
connect
your email
after.
address to Adam and we'll just be in touch with you?
Sure.
And of course, you're welcome to come to meetings and if you have any questions, follow up with Adam or me, we'll be glad to help you out. These are good points. And great references for teachers and hospital staff as well as a perspective.
We won't make you give your email address until after the recording is off so
Right.
that it's not on YouTube, but.
Yes, please. Great. Any other comments? Terrific. I did ask, I was not able to make the Housing Appeals Board conference meeting, the hearing that was held, and Nancy was able to watch it or attend. And I asked kindly if she would give us an update as to how it went, any read on it at all.
Sure, I think Anne was on the call as well, were you
Oh,
not?
Anne, were you as well?
Partially, I was jumping in and out.
Yeah, those were, and I know Marilyn listened in and then Will Kidder, I mean, there were a number of people, there were also a number of
I
people.
was on Will's. Will was.
You were the town of New London?
Yes.
Got it. And there were a number of people from New London who attended actually the hearing. So the typical hearing before the Housing Appeals Board, which is a 3-member board. It is like going in front of the ZBA or something else similar in terms of both parties are there, both parties and their attorneys do the presentation. The Twin Pines group led off and stated their case relative to what has transpired with regards to the understanding about water. And then the attorney for the Springfield Water Precinct led off for their version of things, and it was kind of a tit for tat for the most part. I won't go through all of the nitty-gritty of those. Like any housing appeal board, they take things under consideration. They'll come back and stated that she believes that they need to come back with a report within 30 days. So we should have a hearing on that.
I'm sorry, you say reports, that mean like a decision?
Yes,
Okay,
they'll render a decision.
okay.
I don't know if that can be appealed, and if that then is
Just-
appealed, they can go to court,
Superior Court, I believe.
Superior Court. So we'll see where that goes in the process. The I thought the, three members of the appeals board were very good in that they had great poker faces and you couldn't tell, where things were going. But there were a lot of questions, for the water precinct, on behalf of at least one member of the appeals board who was really trying to understand the criteria that is used to make a determination of, so who do they approve and who don't they approve? And it got a little, no pun intended, wishy-washy, within that. That was interesting. Thing I found distressing, that nobody seemed to blink an eye on was twice the statement was made that DES has stated that there is not a sufficient amount of water to meet the current demand of current users. Stated twice. To me, that was pretty scary. And really goes back to, okay, so how long have we known this and what hasn't been done? So I don't know where this is going to go. And they did ask, in essence, has the precinct made a moratorium on all new development? And that couldn't be answered. And again, that went back to who do they approve? Who do they not approve? By what criteria? Are they using the DAS numbers? Are they, it got really murky. And that there is a clear distinction between residential and commercial, but nobody seemed to know what the commercial standards were, which didn't really help, but it didn't really matter with regards to the overall conversation. Trying to see. Oh, the other statement that I thought was interesting for future planning and development was made by the head of the water precinct, who said that there is always a greater demand on our water in the summer. Which is interesting. But anyways, and I don't think that's just watering the lawns. I mean, there's this big thing about people coming back from, being snowbirds and whatever else, which I don't know. So I'll just leave it at that. So they will come back with a report. Always, it was a fascinating process. I thought the attorney for Twin Pines did a very good job. And we'll just sort of leave it at that.
Great. I will add to that. I also spoke with somebody who attended the hearing, who said a little disappointed there wasn't more discussion about the effect of conservation and how that could add to the capacity that's needed, whether it be for Twin Pines or for the future growth of the town.
Yeah, I think my take on that from a government standpoint, I could see where they would say, there's no way to really judge that, and who really is going to conserve versus whatever, so that the standard has to be set so that it's reasonable and fair and equitable in terms of making some decisions. And that kind of saying, well, you can go ahead and build this thing, but you better conserve water. But no one's going to follow up and make sure you're doing that. So I mean, it gets hard. Right.
Right.
So I did hear quite a bit of it, and I agree with Nancy that twice it came up that the water department has said they did not have water to supply to their current users. And I wanted to raise my hand and say, then why didn't you tell these developers who've spent all this time and money that there was no water?
Exactly.
But we couldn't raise our hands.
So my understanding is that
We should be
Twin
careful.
Pines was gonna be building their own
We should be careful.
wells.
That was after they were told us.
Yeah.
They did put down wells, and it goes on from there. That didn't get into the meeting at all.
So they were allowed to put in wells based on whatever. And then it was changed. Guess you shouldn't build your wells because we don't have enough water.
Well, that's not quite the sequence. Wasn't quite the sequence, but the problem is that the precinct, if you have, let me put it this way, if you've owned property in the water precinct for years and you haven't connected and you've been paying your taxes, so that someday when you want to connect, you can, and then you're denied the ability to connect for residential or commercial, whatever, there's a certain unfairness to that.
Right.
And that's essentially what we're seeing. say here, and, where is the fairness of
Yeah.
what happened?
I think there's also the reality of the water in that even if they had private wells, they needed to be connected to the water system that feeds,
Water suppression, that fire suppression.
yeah, for fire suppression that feeds, what is that development called?
Fenwood.
Fenwood. So they would have to at least have that happen.
And they could have, the fire suppression, I believe, could have come from County Road. There was a benefit to the precinct to force the connection to Fenwood to create a redundancy loop. So if there was a water break, there would be an alternative path.
So that was a concession of Twin Pines.
Correct.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, I had promised a reasonable duration of this meeting, but it was really a terrific conversation, and thank you for the participants and for your support. We're working hard. I do not have, as much as I like to have a specific date for following meeting, I need to leave it open. It's a function of when we get our materials from Resilience, when we have a chance to digest it, and when we can get it back to you and have our follow-up meeting. So please watch your emails, as I know you do, and thanks for attending. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.